Welcome back to social and political theory. In this session, we are going to study the ideas of Michel Foucault, one of the most famous thinkers of the 20th century. Our focus will be on three key themes, being his understanding of power, how human beings are shaped as subjects, and his ideas of modern objectification. Before we delve into Foucault's theory, let's look at what we aim to achieve today. By the end of this session, you should be able to do two main things. Explain Foucault's concept of power, which is first, you will understand how Foucault sees power differently from traditional thinkers. For him, power is not just about rulers, government, or police. Power is everywhere. In our schools, hospitals, families, in every part of our daily routine. And for the second one, we're going to discuss his ideas on subjectivity, and then objectification. This will help this will help us see from how Foucault believes that people are shaped into subjects. Subjectivity means how we form new identity, while subjectification means how society classify or categorize and sometimes control us. Here is Michel Foucault, a 20th century philosopher born from the 1926 to 1984. He's one of the most important thinkers in social and political theory, and his work challenges how we think about power, identity, and how society is controlled. What you see are books and quotes from him. So on the top left corner, you see the history of sexuality, which explores how sexuality is regulated and how power works through discourse of desire and then morality. So, example, how society teach what is considered as normal or abnormal in relationship. That is power what shaping sexuality. And then in our subsequent slides, we'll be going through and explaining his book about the government of self and others, which is based on his lectures exploring how people govern themselves and others. So even when one is not watching, we discipline ourselves, like obeying rules or dressing properly. So we're going to go into that also. And then power, which is essential work. This is one of his book he also wrote, which is bringing together his theory on how power works in modern society. So as we delve into Foucault, it will be right to know his background. As I said, Foucault was not just a philosopher in a library. He lived through the World War II. He challenged social norms, and even his personal struggles shaped his work. He was openly gay at a time of stigmatization, and this experience of marginalization made him ask, how does society control people? And in his background, we'll take a delve into his early life, which Michel Foucault was born in France in 1926. His father was a surgeon, but he chose philosophy instead of what? Medicine. So he studied at Economal Superior, where he began developing his interest in psychology, history, and then philosophy. And in his career and what influenced him, he taught in France, Sweden, Poland, and Germany before returning to France itself. And then I'll say he's one of the most cited academician of the 20th century of our time. Eventually, he became a professor at the Collège de France, one of the most prestigious positions for intellectuals. He lectured there. For example, society must be defended, the government of self and others, and because and this became some of his most influential works. So moving to his key works that we want to talk about, Madness and Civilization of 1961, where he showed how society define and isolate the mad. Discipline and Punishment trace how punishment moves from public execution toward prison and surveillance, and the history of sexuality. Explain how sexuality became a target of regulation and knowledge. These particular works and many more, I think, review how institutions create and categorize people, as in, for example, the mad, criminals, abnormal, or normal, which we'll go over. So, in his personal life and politics, Foucault was an openly gay at a time where there was stigmatization in France, or people in France around that time were stigmatized. And this era shaped his interest in sexuality, identity, and the marginalization. You can also imagine an era being gay like that, the oppressions and the challenges it will come with. So he was politically active, supporting student protests in 1968, criticizing prisons, and then engaging with what social movement. In his late stages of his life, Foucault died from a complication related to what AIDS. And though he passed away early, his ideas remain central in philosophy, politics, science, sociology, gender studies, and then cultural studies. So on Foucault on power. So we're looking at Foucault on power as a first one. So we say power is not just repressive, but it's productive. So traditionally, we viewed power as repression or repressive, where, for example, rulers, police, military. But Foucault views power as productive, that it can shape knowledge, behavior, and possibilities. How? So, for example, when you have a school, you realize that schools don't just punish, they also create education, or they educate what citizens. They organize time and shape what identity. Because in the same confines of school, when you follow a timetable, you are not being controlled, but you are also being made productive. That is in the context of the productivity of power in the view of Michel Foucault. And then power as knowledge. They refined each other in that order. Or power is equal to knowledge. They refined each other. So power is as knowledge, knowledge as power. They refined each other. So Foucault says no power without what? Knowledge, and no knowledge without power. In the sense that institutions produce knowledge that refine or reinforce power. And then when you realize that when you've been to school, you realize that what you are being taught are knowledge that reward enforces what? Power. For example, we have that medicine defines what is healthy or sick, right? And that definition gives what? Doctors the authority to determine who is sick, or define who is sick, or who is healthy. In the same way, the law defines crime, and that gives police and courts their power. So in the country you find yourself, I'll ask you if you can think of ways in your country where knowledge gives people power. For example, when you go to the United States, when you go to, in terms of Ghana, when you go to Nigeria, when you go to Germany, you realize that, for example, exams results, university degrees, census data, all these are ways that you can think of, in ways what knowledge gives what? Power, people power. So as our third point on our slides, which says capillary model. So capillary model of power. In a view of when Foucault views, when we say capillary model of power, It's very important in the sense that power, when you read Foucault, you realize that power does not just flow top to down from presidency to citizens. No, it's spreads like what a network of what capillaries, small blood vessels, reaching into everyday life. So what Foucault is trying to tell us in terms of capillary nature of power is that he's saying power is everywhere. In every part of our life, power works. So example, teachers, parents, doctors, employees all exercise some small form of power daily. Your teacher tells you that I've given you an assignment, the deadline is this. That is power. Your parent tells you that you have to do this and finish at this time. That is power. A doctor tells you take this medicine at this particular time, 1 o'clock. That is power. Employees tells you you have to report to work at 8 o'clock. That is power. That is why we say power is what? Everywhere, not just in government. And then the reason why I brought the last part, say beyond Marxist, is that Foucault actually critique Karl Marx or disagrees with Karl Marx on his view of power as in not limited to class. You see, Karl Marx focuses on class struggle, which is the bourgeoisie versus proletariat. But to Foucault, power also operates in gender, sexuality, medicine, law, criminality. So he sees it beyond just the class system of how Karl Marx classified it as in bourgeoisie and proletariat. No, Foucault says it goes beyond that. So gender, norms of masculinity or femininity, sexuality, rules of what is normal or abnormal. The criminality, the law defines who is a criminal. So in this view, for example, you see a poor person may face class oppression, but a woman may also face gender norms, and a query person uh, may face what sexual what regression. So power works across many layers, not just class. So Foucault is saying it goes just beyond class, as Kamas is saying. No, it goes beyond that. So what we've learned from this particular slide is that Foucault redefines power. That it is not only about control from above, but it's about the everyday rules, norms, and knowledge that shapes how we live, believe, or behave, and even think. So now that we understand Foucault's view of power, that it is not just repressive but productive, interwoven with knowledge, and spread across everyday life, let us move to power, how it shapes us as subjects in our next slides. So Foucault on the subject. So Foucault was not just only interested in how government or institutions control us, as I've made mention of. He wants to show us how power actually shapes us into subjects, into the kind of people we are. So in that sense, there are two models of domination he talks about: the external control and then the internalized norms. So the external control is through laws, restriction, and surveillance. Examples, you have COVID-19 lockdown across the world, where you realize that Germany implemented lockdowns, the United States implemented lockdown, Ghana implemented lockdown, Nigeria implemented lockdowns. All these are forms of what? Modes of what? Of domination, which is the external control. Rules limiting what? Or limited movement. That's curfew what? Enforced by police. Surveillance to monitor what? Compliance. So for example, you have CCTV cameras what? In cities, biometric IDs, or external systems that would control people's action. So you realize that you are driving in town. You are very careful because you know there are CCTV cameras that are watching you. That is what the external control he talks about. You are careful because that's the external control he talks about. But the internalized norms is that true gender rules, identity, expectation, and the power of norms. So, for example, boys are expected to be strong. Girls are expected to be what? To be maybe soft or as nurturing. These expectations shapes what behavior would even without what laws. So, for example, taking going to the African setting, and then taking maybe Nigeria or the Ghanaian social system, you realize that a girl is done with school at a point in time. She's asked, "Won't you get married? When are you getting married?" So you realize that it gets to a point in time, the women begin to what to focus solely on what on marriage, marriage, marriage. You get married, and at a point in time, hey, when are you giving birth? When is your baby coming? Then it becomes another pressure, and people seek ways, seek means that they can give birth because of this norms. So it's become like, as a girl, you get to a certain age, society has made it like you have to get married at all costs. You have to give birth at all costs. If you're a guy, maybe in African culture, saying, oh, you don't cry. So maybe in the local dialect of the Akan language, bema ensu, referring to the term that men don't cry. So even though you are supposed to emotionally express yourself to mentally free yourself, you are seen as weak if you're a man and you cry. So that is what Michel Foucault is talking about, the internalized norms. So that beauty standard. So people dieting, bleaching, or altering their bodies without anyone what forcing them. And that is very what powerful, because the most powerful what form of control is when we begin to police ourselves. Because people begin to watch their weight, because society has created a standard. You have to look this way. You have to come or present yourself in this manner. So these are the two mode of what of domination he talks about, as in control, and then external control, and then internalized norms. And then the effect of this is that it leads to what? Objectification of what? Of the subject. People become objects that can be what? Studied, categorized, and controlled. So schools will categorize students: excellent, average, class. So when you come to the African settings, maybe in some schools like Ghana, Nigeria, and other West African countries, what you find is that the students are graded from what? First class, upper, second class, upper, lower, fail, pass. So that subjectivity what leads to what? The effect is what? Objectification, because people become what? Objects that can be what? Studied and categorized and what? Controlled. And then you find hospitals will classify people as what? Healthy or sick. Uh, Criminal justice defines somebody as what? A criminal. And this actually what is what Foucault is talking about, is that this leads to what? The reduction of what? Or reduce what? Autonomy. Because individuals are no longer fully free from what? Fully free, but are shaped by what? Systems of what? Of knowledge and what? And power. So let's put this scenario in our minds. Let's think of a student who is in school. So you take a student, I just use a name, I'm just using this name for uh, explanation sake. You have Solomon Avoka, and then he's a student who breaks school rules. It is not just the teacher punishing him, as in Solomon Avoka, but the what? The timetable, the exam system, the uniform policy, all works together to what? To shape how that student see himself. Over time, he will come and internalize that, and what? The discipline, and start what? Policing himself. That is how power produce what? Subject. Because at a point in time, you find Solomon Avoka moving from that. He's now moving that, no, I have to move up to the exams ladder. If I'm on third, now I have to get to first. There's this thing that pushes in a timetable. So my worker becomes more conscientized, in the sense that now, okay, fine, I have to be class here at 8 o'clock. And when I go here 8 o'clock, I'm having this one at this. The timetable begins to kick in. And at a point in time, what you see is that that power would produce, he becomes a subject of everything, because over the time, he's what? He becomes internalized and disciplined and start what? Policing himself. So for Foucault, domination is not just what? External, but also what? Internal. So we are shaped by what? By laws and rules, but also by norms, and not just norms. The norms we accept and as enforced what? On ourselves. That is what Foucault seeks to make us understand. And looking at the mode of objectification, which is societies what separate the normal from the abnormal. Institutions we see what are seen what excluding or isolate others seen as what abnormal. So, example, you find asylum for what? For those who are madly ill. In quote, you have prison for criminals. That is it. So imagine how we go to schools and then schools sometimes divide students into weak versus strong. So the science versus the art. That is a form of objectification. Then there's this scientific word classification, knowledge and science categorizing of people, where you have medicine, we have psychiatrists, and exams define who is what? Healthy, sick, intelligent, slow, normal, abnormal. So you realize that you have what? IQ test classifying students. Some students, even for some jobs and other things, you have to take an IQ test to classify people. Doctors labeling somebody as mentally ill. Exams ranking students as brilliant and what? An average or average. So in the view of this, you realize that science does not just what? Describe. It creates categories that shapes how people are treated. And then he's created that category of what? Mental health. And then you are treated in a certain way because we are saying you are mentally ill. You're a brilliant student. Science puts you that you are created, you are seen in a very different way. That, oh, this is good. And you receive certain treatment. So that is what we're talking about. Science does not just what describe, it creates categories that shapes how people are treated. And then subjectification as individuals for their own identity through what norms they internalize. And then the example of the Panopticon, I'll explain in the subsequent slides, where you think you are being watched, so you discipline yourself. So you, like a student, you behave in class, your behavior in class is you're on point because you feel like the teacher is looking at you. So for example, if you have Daniel Opoku in class as a student, he's in class, but the moment a teacher walks in and the teacher, even though the teacher may not be looking at him, he's quiet because he has a feeling that okay, fine, the teacher will can see me or something of that sort. That is it. The gender role, males what avoids males are seen as weak if I said you have to cry as a man and all those things. Female are seen to be acting a certain way as in a feminine way to meet societal expectation. And the thing over here is I realize that sometimes we don't even always need police or teachers to teach us. We often control ourselves because we are internalized. So we've internalized the social rules. So Foucault's for us to understand this, or in summary of this particular study, like Foucault's mode of objectification shows that power works by what? Dividing people, classifying them scientifically, and shaping their identity through what? Norms. And this is how power becomes what? Effective, because people are controlled not only from what? Outside, but also from what? Inside themselves, which is a powerful tool. As we move to the slides, which is on disciplinary power, disciplinary power. So Foucault argues that modern power is not just about kings, president, ministers, or maybe senators, but giving orders or no, but instead it works through what small, everyday techniques that disciplines our body and what our behavior. So he calls this what disciplinary power. So the techniques of discipline. So I want to give an example. It will throw more light on it for us to understand. So timetable and a schedule. So we realize that when you go to school, there's something that's been regulated in in school as a timetable. There's work, there's even a prayer time. All these things that exist makes you regulate your time. So for what happens is that you go to school and then you know, okay, I have to go to school at 10 o'clock. I have to be at this class at 11, right? You have to be at work at 2 o'clock p.m. You have to be you have to go to church on Sunday maybe at 6 o'clock. That is what he's talking about. You are being disciplined yourself. So for example, the University of Ghana class schedule, maybe University of Urbana Champaign, Illinois class schedule, University of Chicago's class, that controls you. It's letting you do something. There's a straight work hours that you have to attend, come to office at 6 o'clock, at 5 o'clock. I'll be there at this time. So what Foucault is making us understand over here, power here doesn't punish you directly, right? But it organizes your life minute by minute. It organizes your life minute by minute. And then the surveillance, the panopticon, we talk about the story itself. So possibility of being watched makes people regulate themselves. So you find yourself in the streets of Accra, you find yourself in Berlin, Germany, yeah, you find yourself in Lagos, you find yourself in Washington or Johannesburg, and then you realize that there are CCTV cameras that are watching you. There are these cameras that are all over watching you. It makes you regulate your behavior. You are careful what you do. Biometric ID systems, or even teachers monitoring what a class. So, for example, if you have Daniel Poku as a student, he finds himself in a class of 30 people, right? And the teacher walks in. When the teacher walks in, which is maybe Shelley as a teacher, she walks into this particular class. If Shelley keeps on walking up and down through the class, Daniel may want to be talking. He may be a talkative, but Daniel is quiet because he feels like, okay, fine. If I speak, maybe even though she may not be looking at me, she may know what I'm the one who spoke, so I'll be in trouble. So like that, Daniel begins to what to control himself, thinking or seeing that the teacher may see what he's doing or may see that he's the one who spoke. That is what we're talking about in terms of what a CCTV camera. It makes you regulate yourself. It makes you behave in a certain way. So looking at the Panopticon story, yeah, which the originator in itself, Jeremy Bentham, and then we're going to look at Foucault's interpretation of this by Jeremy Bentham. So the original idea of this panopticon was designed in the 18th century by this English philosopher, and he brought the idea of this modern word prism, right? So it was a circular building with cells arranged around the outer wall, right? And at the center there was a watchtower, a long, tall tower, where at the top there's a certain glass level around it, where somebody standing down cannot see who if somebody's in or not, but the person who's in could see all those around or all the buildings, secular buildings around, or what is happening. So that watchtower was where the guard could observe all the prisoners. So the prisoners could not see the guard clearly, but the guard could what potentially see all of them. And why it works, it was like a genius design because prisoners never knew when they are being watched because they might be being watched at any moment in time. So what do? They begin to discipline themselves. But this means that the guard doesn't have to use violence all the time. The system makes prisoners regulate their own behavior. So realize that Foucault used the panopticon in the discipline and then punish, which was in 1957, and then Foucault used that panopticon as a metaphor or as a metaphoric description for modern society, where he argues that schools, hospitals, military, barracks, workplace, and all these places use similar techniques, which is surveillance, the CCTV, the attendance registration, the ID system, the ranking and categorizing people, training bodies to move, to work, and behave. properly. So in modern society, we are all in the what? Panopticon. As Foucault said, we are all in the what? The Panopticon. So for Foucault, the Panopticon is not just a prison. It is a symbol of what modern what society control over people through the surveillance system, the rules, and what and the self what discipline. And then our next point is the exams and what assessment. So we've set a standard of what of measurement, rank, and normalized people. So you are in Ghana, you have to write an exam called West Africa Examination Council results, right? Which rank student. Maybe you're a student, you have to write TOEFL, you have to write SAT. All these things are some. Then the university has a grading system from first class students and upper students. 3.0 represents a GPA of this, and all those things. So exam does not just test knowledge; they also define who is brilliant, average, or weak. And the last part is rules, prescriptions, and training. Regulate conduct what in detail. So rules in the military, training for health workers, code of conduct in schools. You are told you are supposed to dress in a certain way. Don't move in this way. Don't wear this. All that is what you're talking about. The rules, prescriptions, and then what training. Then the big idea. Say power what operates through what routines and what and rules. And we are all prisoners of rules. Think about it. From childhood to adulthood, rules shaped how what we sit, how we eat, how we work, and even speak. You are told, okay, when you're speaking to an adult in the African setting, don't do this. You can't speak this way. You can't talk this way. If you are eating, you cannot eat with your left. You can't do that. When you go to some society, all these are there. So the rules are shaping you, how you work, how you speak. This is what disciplinary power at work. Brings us to the end of part A of our lecture on Michel Foucault, which today we have looked at his background, his conception of power, how power shaped the subject, mode of objectification, and disciplinary power. The big idea is that power is everywhere. It's capillary, shaping not only our actions, but also who we are as an individual. And in part B, we will continue with Foucault's idea on biopower, governmentality, biopolitics, and how this works or connects to thinkers like Agambe, Imempe. So what I'll say is that stay tuned for that. And then if you found this video helpful, kindly subscribe and like the channel. It really helps us to reach out to more students, and do not forget to share your thoughts in the comment section. I would also love to hear from you to see how Foucault's idea works in wherever you find yourself on the African continent, in Europe, in America, Latin America, and all continents around. And thank you for watching. Keep your questions coming, and then also keep asking powerful questions and keep asking the questions of what power is. And I will see you in the next lecture. Thank you.